Good morning. It is January 6th, a Tuesday, and we are scrambling here as we're 3 minutes late. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. With me, Ian Burns, out there in the nation's capital. Kind of a beautiful day here in the Okanagan. Cloudy, overcast, but temperature still not bad. You did show me a picture out there in Ottawa, and it did not look pretty yesterday.
It's not a city known for its weather, really, is it?
We got lots, though. We have a really big show. Again, we'd like you to like, subscribe, share, all those things. Help us get this out to a much larger audience. You're going to actually really like what we have to show you this morning. It's crazy stuff, actually. Absolutely crazy. And sometimes you can't even believe what it is that we're looking at. But we'll kick it off with some of the headlines, though. Some of the headlines this morning. Oh, a little bit of technical stuff here. The pipeline has become Canada's economic lifeline, and yet, that's a big question. Sturko wants Eby to come clean on decriminalization. Trouble in NATO as Greenland becomes point of contention. Carney still pitching carbon competitiveness. Liberals and many Canadians suffering from delusions as the economy craters. Liberals coming to realize they were oh so wrong on their resource suppression. Will the Canadian consumer have to rely on Trump for food cost relief? Liberals in the government media have stink all over them with Freeland. Media stir up more fear on U.S. invasion of Canada. Is that coming back? Why is there something on my face, it seems like they're like moving around there? Media stir up more fear of, Liberals caught in yet another fib. The world is watching Canada dismantle democracy. Canada Post delivering drugs to your doorstep. Who would have thought, eh? Massive green failure in Australia. Markets on fire. And the left has lost the plot on Venezuela. And trouble. Oh, in Tim Walz's camp there too. What a fall from grace for Tim Walz. All that and a lot more on the really big show. Well, you ready to get into it? Why don't we listen?
As usual.
Why don't we listen to Mark Carney first of all? Let's listen to what he has to say here.
President Trump has said one of the key reasons that he went into Venezuela was to get the oil out. Do you think this will impact the Canadian oil sector, and does that increase the need, in your estimation, to have a pipeline to the northwest coast of BC?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. One is that, from our perspective, the removal of an illegitimate, corrupt, repressive government or leader, Mr. Maduro, is welcome news. It creates the possibility for democratic transition in Venezuela. We very much support that. We're available to support that, and we urge that to happen in a peaceful transition. And that's the best prospect for greater prosperity for the Venezuelan people and to respect the will of the Venezuelan people. Now, a functioning, not corrupt Venezuelan economy will produce more oil. It'll be better for the Venezuelan people. It'll be more stable for the Western Hemisphere. That's all a good thing. Canadian oil, Canadian energy, but I'll speak because you asked specifically about Canadian oil. It's been our view, and we're working towards this, that Canadian oil will be competitive because it is low risk, clearly low risk, low cost, the marginal costs. There's been huge progress in getting down the cost. And low carbon, which is what the Pathways project, carbon capture, will bring. And that makes Canadian oil competitive for the medium and long term. So we welcome the prospect of peace, a peaceful transition, democratic Venezuela. We welcome the prospect of greater prosperity in Venezuela, but we also see the competitiveness of Canadian oil. And we're investing, or we're putting in place measures so that that's going to happen. And in that context, a pipeline and exports to Asia. We've got competitive product, and we'd be diversifying our markets. And that's one of the reasons why we signed the comprehensive MOU with Alberta. So
10 years of suppression of our resource sector is coming back to bite them in the butt and bite Canadians in the butt here now because, you know, like Pierre Poilievre put out this piece too, and 18 months he thinks that the Venezuelan oil industry could get back up and running. And it's also where the capital flows. We'll talk about that a little bit later too, where capital is going to flow. Because that oil in Venezuela is very similar to the heavy crude that comes out of Fort Mac, and the U.S. refineries are set up for it. So now, not only have we suppressed our resources forever, now we have like a bigger competitor than us coming on stream. Like they have more reserves, oil reserves than us. They're actually closer to that market, and there's likely going to be lower costs to get into that market. And Carney is still pitching carbon competitiveness. I just don't know who's going to buy it. And yet, still no decision on a pipeline, like a yes or a no.
That is the most shocking thing, isn't it? That he's talking about the MOU, but he still hasn't actually made it happen. He's just signed a piece of paper that could well be meaningless. There's just no energy. There's no push. I would say about Venezuela, even at peak production, they've never matched Canada. They're about a million. They were about a million and a half barrels a day shy of Canada, about 3.5 versus 5 million. I mean, theoretically, they could. They have huge reserves, but it's about daily production. They theoretically could get past Canada in terms of production. But I would also say, yeah, I mean, you look at a map. We love looking at maps, don't we? And it is quite close. I mean, that's why those refineries were set up in the first place, isn't it? In the Gulf Coast, the Gulf of America. They were set up to process that Venezuelan oil. And then when Chavez and the stupid communists that seized control of Venezuela screwed up Venezuela, Canada came in and ate their lunch. You know, a lot of our prosperity of the Harper time, for example, and the early Trudeau days, to some extent, kind of we owe thanks to Hugo Chavez and his brainless communism destroying the oil industry of Venezuela, because we then swooped in. But I would say, looking at the map, it looks rather close, but equidistant, really, isn't it? But they don't have pipelines. You have to remember that, and we do. We have pipelines going down into the United States. And though, you know, transport by sea, marine transport is the cheapest form of transport, I'm pretty sure pipelines are considerably cheaper than having to commission an oil tanker and all the rest of it. So I think we still have an advantage there. But my main objection to what Carney said there is this ludicrous notion that Canadian oil is cheaper. It's cheaper maybe in that sense that I've just outlined, that maybe going through a pipeline is cheaper than having to go across the sea, across the Caribbean Sea. Okay, yeah, maybe that's cheaper, but that doesn't make Canadian oil cheaper in general, does it? That's just that very unique context of Canada as energy provider to the United States via pipelines. I mean, that's a very specific thing to mention, isn't it? Because in general, of course, Canadian oil isn't really cheaper to produce because it's regulated in a way that oil is not regulated anywhere else in the world, with the forced carbon capture and things like that, and the carbon taxes that pay for all of these things, and also subsidies in the form of subsidizing carbon capture companies from the US to come up into Canada and do things like that. That is not cheaper. And then the last thing I'd say about this, which I find so funny, he's talking about it's lower carbon. The world's going to want lower carbon energy. The only part of the world that is even half serious about wanting this low carbon energy is Europe, which is a shrinking, stagnating market. And also, to get to Europe, you have to go out of Quebec, don't you? We've already been here with Energy East, but you've got to at least go through Quebec, and that's not happening. That's not even being discussed. That's not even on the menu. Mark Carney doesn't even speak about that. So how are we going to sell to Europe, the only part of the world that's interested in this low carbon oil, if we can't even get oil out of the east of Canada? I mean, it's just much like the Chrystia Freeland fiasco that we've just seen yesterday. It just looks like they haven't got a clue what they're doing. They're gone. It's on the hoof. Every day is a new calamity, and they don't know what they're doing. There is no great plan. It's just make it up on the day.
Yeah, and the bigger problem is the Venezuela hasn't seen capital inflows ever since Chavez took over, like for 20 plus years. So the amount of capital that's going to have to go into Venezuela is going to be enormous. And so the Americans, because they're the big oil field companies, they're the big companies, are going to have to decide where to deploy that capital. And Canada still does not look like a company that has certainty where people are going to deploy billions and billions of dollars, because the American military sit on top of Venezuela and protect that investment. They're not going to sit on top of Canada right now because of even what they're doing right now. We're going to talk about it later with the posturing with what's going on with NATO right now. So, but again, this chart here shows you the consumption of oil that the Liberals said that was basically dead. Eby said that too, that nobody's even going to want oil. By the time they get a pipeline built, nobody's going to want oil.
So Elizabeth May said that as well, didn't she?
Yeah, this chart says otherwise. And again, going to Southeast Asia, those main markets there, they're not asking for carbon capture. China surely is not going to ask for carbon capture oil. And neither is Japan. They signed a deal with the Americans. And all of those countries will take oil, the cheapest, most reliable source of energy that they can find. That is the thing. For a prosperous country, cheap, reliable energy. And Carney and the Liberals continue to put carbon capture on top of it. And the big thing, and Eby's still in the way here, getting the pipeline, 9 months, no decision. If he wants to be the PM of Canada, he should just come out and say, we're building a pipeline. Don't care what Eby says, don't care what anybody says. The pipeline's moving ahead. Shovels are on the ground tomorrow. We need to start moving forward. And how important is oil? How important is oil to us? And let's listen to this clip here from CTV here, first of all, just to kind of highlight the importance of oil to the Canadian economy.
So just before we wrap up then, as we wrap up, what sectors of the Canadian economy are most likely to feel the impact first?
Well, you look at the stock market today. I mean, energy producers, oil field services, people are hitting the sell button first and asking questions later. Transportation, manufacturing follows fuel costs shift. Public finances and trade are next. Energy exports were $208 billion in 2024. And if you hadn't had these kinds of trade, the trade deficit would have ballooned by over $1 trillion the last decade. There's 400,000 jobs tied to the sector. And so that's how critical it is to the entire economy. You have a situation where tariffs are coming in, impacting primarily Ontario. You have real estate market that's rolling over in Ontario. You have land claim issues that are preventing capital from going into British Columbia. And now you have this impacting Alberta producers. It couldn't have come at a worse time. And so it's going to impact the entire country. And hopefully that's enough of a wake-up call to put forward and get this memorandum of understanding put into action and getting a pipeline built so we can get that oil to other markets besides Dunroe and Donald Trump.
Great to have you with us today, Martin.
That's good. I mean, we've talked about it how many times, how important energy is to our economy, and also just to a prosperous nation. Energy is everything. We talk about it over and over and over again.
It's the Canadian economy, isn't it? I mean, it's Canada. Canada is hydrocarbons plus inflated real estate attached to a bureaucracy or a health system or something. That's basically what Canada is. These extraordinarily deluded people that think that Canada can somehow just kill its oil industry and prosper by weaving baskets or something like that, or with marketing companies. God help those people. They're just so hopelessly naive. And it almost feels like they will never learn. But the hostility to oil as well, does it have to be kind of pushed in schools or something like that? Do we have to have, like, in elementary school and high school, do you have to teach people what oil is and how half the world's population would die if we didn't have oil? Do we need to start doing that? Do we need to start educating people and saying, yeah, if you want food, you need tractors, which are fueled by diesel, which comes from oil. That's literally how the world works. Do we have to start teaching people this? The stupidity it's just been dragging on for so long. I really don't think it's tolerable anymore. But I just wanted to point out what he said here. Every single one of these problems that he highlights, that he lists sort of Canada's biggest problems, they are all political problems. They're all caused by weak people in charge. They're all caused by weak leaders. The land claims in BC, that's because the NDP is feeble and can't do anything decisive because they're just, well, you can make your own reason up for that, but they're weak either way. The pipeline issue is to do with weakness in Ottawa. I mean, the real estate market as well. How long have the sirens been going off about the real estate market in Ontario and British Columbia? These are all political problems. And once again, we have to say loud and clear that having weak leaders and stupid, incompetent leaders has real consequences on your life. It really does make your life a lot worse. So when people say like, well, what can you do? You know, it's just the way it is, or it's just politics or something like that. Not really. Look at Canada's history. Canada used to have really good leaders, really astute, wise, very, very intelligent people who built this country and made it rich. Now it's got stupid leaders and everything's gone downhill. The consequences couldn't be more obvious.
And I'm going to say one of the bigger weaknesses is a media that's been corrupted and crippled by the Liberal government that has allowed them to continue on with this madness where they haven't been called to account. Because, you know, even some people, you know, watching this stuff say, you know, we're like an American media outlet and all these things. Like, if we don't start calling into power to account, it's going to continue and continue. And you can see the Canadian economy get crippled and more crippled, and people start to suffer. People are going hungry in Canada because the elite continue to want to have their way while the population suffers. Help us share this out there with more people. Shut off the mainstream media. CBC needs to be defunded. All government funding of media needs to stop, because this is where we're at. They're not being held to account. And we're going to see that later. We're going to talk about the Freeland thing. They completely embarrassed themselves. They completely embarrassed themselves with Venezuela. They completely embarrassed themselves with Freeland. And in the oil and gas industry, what Ian just said the last few minutes, when have you heard that from CBC or CTV over the past 10 years? All we've talked about there is climate change and the world's coming to an end and we need to get rid of hydrocarbons. Now, with our backs against the wall and our economy cratering, and we're still not making a decision 9 months later.
Madness. I would also say just one last comment. I've said this before. You've said this before. A lot of the thinking seems to be, all right, we can just diversify away from the United States. We'll just sell to Asia and Europe. We'll sell all of our products there. Have to say once again, we have access to the Pacific Ocean without being molested by foreign powers or by pirates or whatever because of something called the United States Navy. That's what protects our commercial shipping. We have to remember these basics. It's like literally going right back to basics. If we want to trade with Asia in a post-globalized world, we either have to build a very, decent navy, like an ocean-going navy that can protect our ships and guarantee freedom of transport, or we need to be very good friends with the Americans. There's no other option.
And then this is the Financial Post, and this is what I said earlier. Capital will flow where there's certainty and it's treated better. And right now, Canada does not treat capital with any type of certainty. Right now, that's what the biggest thing in Canada is, uncertainty. Why would anybody invest billions in a pipeline when they don't even know if they can get it to the West Coast? And even if they can get it to the West Coast, can they have a tanker on the West Coast? All these things block certainty, every one of them. And then the land claims in British Columbia. So like, who is going to invest billions and billions of dollars if the Prime Minister cannot come out and say clearly and define it very clearly that Canada will build a pipeline no matter what? This is the path. We're going on this path. If you got some stuff you want to talk about, great. But other than that, we're building a path. And he has to let go of his climate agenda that seems to be fueled by the WEF and the globalist order. Because if you look at the main beneficiary, you go watch that video we put up there on carbon capture. Brookfield has invested, the biggest investor in CCUS. And here it is, it's being pushed by a guy that's wealth is tied to CCUS and Brookfield. This should not be happening in Canada. And then we need stability, competitiveness, coherent tax policies, but we're not getting that, right? And then there's a good article in the Bureau there talking about, Canada's a bit delusional. You know what I mean? Like many of the Liberals and a lot of the people in the elites are very delusional. But here we have what Ian talked about. This is what's going on. Land ownership, uncertainty, real estate, cratering, immigration. We're going to show you later. They don't even know what the numbers are if people are leaving, coming, or going. Organized crime, we're sending drugs through the mail, and our ports aren't being inspected. National security, all of these things are causing many Canadians to lose faith in this government and just in the Canadian way of life. And it's those are just truths, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear them. because they think that it's anti-Canadian. But being oblivious to it doesn't make it better.
I mean, I think you nailed it earlier on. There is no certainty. It's not just about capital, it's about everything, isn't it? It's about your faith in the country. That's being diminished because there is no certainty, because there are no strong leaders. And when I'm saying strong leaders, I don't mean mustachioed men from the 20th century. I mean somebody with a spine. Even Pierre Trudeau, I know a lot of people absolutely despise Pierre Trudeau, but at least he had a pair of bollocks. You know what I mean? It's like, for God's sake. Or Jean Chrétien, somebody that you speak highly of. There needs to be somebody that is willing to be decisive and put people's fears at ease and say, this will happen, this is going to happen. If there's a law that blocks it, we're going to change the law because we're the government. We're going to fix it, guys. It's okay. And that's where capital flows to that naturally, obviously, but not just capital. It's more than that. It's almost like social capital or political capital or something. It's
the brain. It's the brain.
People will be drawn to that, and they'll feel good about that, and it will make everything better. But if you continuously fail to offer certainty, which has been so far Mark Carney's leadership in these 9 months, has just been a failure after failure to provide certainty, then you invite this kind of anarchy, you invite this chaos. And, in that context, there's going to be a lot of trouble.
I would even add into that is this certainty in his dialoguing with the people, because there is no certainty in what he says, because he says different things, or he says it with ambiguity, so you don't understand what he says. And if he is being ambiguous, it's on purpose, it's intentional, and he's conflicted. Like it's clear. He should. My advice is sell all your stocks and that to show that you have no conflicts, and then start speaking with clarity and show the Canadians that you are working for Canada. Because right now there's so many conflicts, there's so much ambiguity. I mean, you can't get a straight answer. He doesn't being held accountable. And tell your ministers to be held accountable and do interviews. How long did you wait for that interview request with Mark Miller?
Well, whenever he was appointed, and then the answer came
beginning of December.
A few days ago, yeah.
And you got an answer, and the
Quite a
answer
long
was
time.
not interested.
That's after I sent an email as well, like quite a cheeky email, where I just said, don't you have a system in place, like protocols, where you have to respond within a certain amount of time or something like that? That obviously they just ignored that and then said, no interview, bugger off.
They did, didn't they point you to the website? If you have any questions on Mark Miller's stance, just go to the website. This is a government that refuses to be held accountable. And even locally, Stephen Fuhr, 7 emails by one of the most respected business reporters here in the area, 7 emails unanswered. How many emails have we sent to Mark Carney's office? How many? We could go down the list, and we're going to start calling them out, because this government refuses to be held accountable. And we're going to show you some stories later where they refuse to even provide details. They refuse everything. This is, and they speak about democracy all the time.
In that press conference, that press conference should have been about 2 hours long, I think, because there are so many scandals right now. There are so many emergencies within the Carney government in Canada that should have been an extremely long press conference. But it was, as usual, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. And one of the reporters asked a question, and then for his follow-up, is something that journalists always do anyway, it's totally normal, but his follow-up had nothing whatsoever to do with the first question. It was a completely different question. I have
it actually. We're going to do it.
Greenland, and then I think it was Freeland or something like that. And then Carney had the gall to be like, oh, you call that a follow-up? Something like that. It's like, yeah, actually, that is what I'm going to do, because you won't answer questions. You come in, you swan in here for 15 bloody minutes, answer in a completely opaque fashion, and then bugger off, and we don't get any answers. Despite all these scandals burning away in Canada, all these enormous questions, you don't hang around to answer questions. So there's a definite kind of hostility to openness from this Liberal government. I mean, we've commented on it many times, but they just refuse to be held to account by the media, except in these very sort of brief windows, highly choreographed press conferences.
Well, I'm going to show you what the Liberal, this is a podcast, it's a Liberal shill podcast. And you can see they're losing their ground with the people when they start screaming at you to make sure that you behave. And it's going to have some foul language, but it's not our foul language. But listen in If you don't behave, and if you question Canada, this is what you're going to reap the wrath of. Here you go.
Are good people, and the world knows that. And we have a democracy, and we have free and fair elections, and we have a strong economy. We are not a country that is consumed by crime that needs to be rescued by anybody. We are a fucking beacon to the world, and this is going to be Canada's century. And I'm not going to put up with one single troll or one single person who can't fucking get that message and protect our country.
That's good. There you go. Shut up. Hey, shut up. It's all good. Just because you can't pay your rent, you can't buy food, just shut up, right? Just shut up.
Canada's century in what way and how?
Well,
How's that gonna happen?
liberal control, maybe. That's about it, because I don't know what else, right?
What does that even mean, Canada's century? Are we going to build the world's biggest military or something like that? Are we going to build companies that rival Apple and Microsoft and all the rest of it? Like, how's this going to happen?
And the people,
Exactly.
and the people are looking at Canada as an example, a beacon. What beacon is that? I was just in Tokyo. There's a beacon. Like, no homelessness, no drug usage all over the streets, super clean. There's a beacon. Have you walked in downtown Vancouver, even in downtown Kelowna? Have you walked in some of the areas? Beacon.
Yeah. Even indeed Ottawa, where they all work and live,
Yeah.
increasingly overcome by drugs and homelessness.
This is to the boomers that are, starting to have buyer's remorse for voting again for the Liberals. This is the message being screamed at them, that they need to shut up and pay, and like, toe the party line.
But how do they think the world works? Do they think that you can just kind of wag your finger at China and Russia and America, and that if you just drop the F-bomb enough times and sort of like shame them enough,
Wow.
humiliate them, make them feel embarrassed and bad, that then you'll win? It's like, for how long now has Canada been governed by people like that, who have absolutely no idea about real power? They have no idea about geopolitics, economics, anything. Just Melanie Jolie's everywhere you look.
Yeah, we get some comments that said, because we try to be pluralist, and we try to call it out, try to call power out, and now we get called the American media outlet and a plant and all this stuff. And I'm just like,
I saw that, yeah.
as opposed to what? So we should all be just like government co-opted, crippled, and just at the begging trough for, there you go, another American media network trying to cause division in Canada. No, the Liberals are causing the division in Canada. They've been doing it for 10 years. That's their MO. That's what they use to keep power, to stay in power, is division. That's
but also, what a strange way of kind of reacting to something that you don't like, just calling it American.
No.
How weird is that? I mean, obviously we're not American, for starters. We have absolutely nothing American about us. But how strange is it that this hostility, this hatred of the United States, coming from people whose safety, day-to-day safety, whose entire lives really depend upon the United States? I mean, you can kind of see now why the MAGA diehards come out with all kinds of things about Canada and Europe, and they just say, oh, they're just ungrateful, that that we protect them and they just despise us in return. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of that going on, isn't there? And if you were America, if you were, you're an American nationalist, I can totally understand why you would be furious about that.
Well, Danielle Smith gets it. She's one of the more reasonable people, one of the more reasonable politicians in Canada. She understands it's in a national emergency and Canada does not have a moment to lose. Yet, where's Mark Carney? When they said it themselves, they say it over and over and over again. Canada's facing the biggest crisis since the Second World War. Yet, how much time is being spent on it? How many times has it been to Europe? Why does Canada need? Why couldn't he just do a Zoom call? Like, why does he need to go there with Macron and Starmer and all those guys to pat Zelensky on the back? How many more billions are we going to put in Zelensky's pocket before we figured out we should be begging somebody for money because we have none left?
But why is that top of the list of priorities as well? Ukraine. I mean, God help them. Most people in this country, I imagine, are very sympathetic to Ukraine. But how is that top of the list? I don't think so. I mean, it's quite literally several thousand miles away. How is that top of the list for a country that is in big, big trouble, as we've pointed out, as many people point out? I don't understand how that could be literally like objective number one is help Ukraine. It's kind of, I don't think most Canadians look at it that way. I think it would probably be closer to like number 10 or something like that.
Well, Pierre Poilievre putting out some stuff. I mean, he's got lots to work with there, and he's all the showboating and theatrical signing ceremonies. We showed you that early on when Trump would go around sign deals. Mark Carney was signing guest books, but the media portrayed it like it was a big signing. Remember the stuff when he was in Asia there too? He was signing guest books, basically, with the same kind of pomp and ceremony that, you know, Trump was signing actual deals. And this is what we get. No free trade across provinces. We talked about that. Nothing. All the anti-resource laws still in place. They just put a new law on top, Bill C-5 on top of it, which is getting really nothing done. No new pipelines. Not one foreign country has cut tariffs on Canada. Deficit has doubled. Grocery prices rising. Like, all these things are true. All these things are true. Every one of those things are true. And we don't. And we're Mark Carney joked the other day that we're in talks when he did that interview with Rosemary Barton. We're in talks to have talks with the most important trading partner, and also the most important economy, also the most important military in the world, in a you know, like a scarier and scarier world. Like, you know, it's best to be friends with the most powerful military in the world and not continually sticking a stick in their eye like the lady there that just did, who thinks that, and we're going to talk about it. They got Charlie Angus shows up there too, but
I would say, I wouldn't phrase it like that either. I wouldn't say it's best not to. It's literally, you can't. You can't not have America. You can't be. I mean, Canada's often described as a middle power. I feel like that maybe that's almost saying too much. Sort of like a small to middle power. Let's be honest. It doesn't have a military after all. I mean, probably we should call it a small power. But anyway, how are we going to survive in this world? How could we possibly survive in this world with the likes of China, Russia, and the United States? It's not like a kind of, oh, it would be optimal if we were friends with the United States. It is literally, we're friends with the United States or we're dead. That's it.
It's
There's
imperative.
no real choice.
It's imperative. It's imperative. And yet, the especially like the Liberals have, in Trudeau, have used a lot of these shills, like that podcaster and what's that other lady's name, Rachel Gilmore. They used her in committee hearings. She's an expert. She was on CTV as a fact checker and got fired, I think, the next day. These are the people that are just screaming at the public, and they use issues that aren't really issues that should be talked about when there's so many things that are bad. Pierre Poilievre put out a letter, though, and saying how important this is. Like, the Venezuelan situation, really, that's the second page of the letter, really, you know, like, brought this to the front, where we need to really treat this seriously. I mean, we should have been treating it seriously 10 years ago. And here we are, again, piddle-puddling around. Mark Carney's in Europe again with his buddies. His buddies seem more important than Canada, seems to me. Like, why is he in Europe right now when Canada needs somebody at the helm here at home, and that will talk to media too? Like, they will not be accountable. If they would be held accountable, they would be better, because they would know they have to actually do stuff for the betterment of Canada. But they refuse to be held accountable, and that's what you should demand, is accountability.
Absolutely. Though, on that topic, I can't resist saying that Pierre Poilievre is having a go at Mark Carney for his failure to do business with the Americans, to, you know, improve the relationship with the Americans. He and every other Conservative Party supporter seems to have forgotten that he pushed Carney and Trudeau for not being strong enough on counter tariffs and various threats back at the United States. How does he think that would have worked out? I mean, in retrospect, it looks like that probably wouldn't have worked at all. It would have made things a lot worse.
They all support supply management, which is costing the consumer. Who wins in supply management? Voter. I mean, the MPs win because it's votes, but the consumer sure doesn't.
Well, and a few tens of thousands of farmers in Quebec and Ontario. That's who wins, really, isn't it?
And bureaucrats,
because they get a fixed price and they don't have any competition. It's just a glorious monopoly.
Pierre Poilievre has to come out against. I think you got the name switched up there, unless Ian's changed his name there today. But hey, we'll keep you confused. There you go. Pierre Poilievre needs to come out against supply management. It's better for the consumer. It's better for everybody. The food professor has laid this out so many times. And they dumped 1 billion liters of milk down the drain. How many Canadians could have used that milk this year? How many Canadians? And last year, how many Canadians could use that? When 50% of Canadians are $200 away from meeting their monthly obligations and mortgages are resetting. Like, these are the facts that are going on in Canada. And then people in British Columbia worried that they don't even own their home. If you don't have certainty, I don't know. But the environment minister now, this is from Holly Donald Blacklocks, 10 years later, she's now saying Canadian oil and gas is among the cleanest in the world. A message that was said by the oil and gas industry forever, and a message that was said by the Conservatives forever. And this document is dated just weeks before Cabinet agreed in principle to expand Alberta's oil and exports. Wasn't in this. Karina Gold still sits in that Liberal as an MP and said that we need to landlock Alberta's energy so they can't get it out to market. Mark Carney also said 80% in his book Values, and he said recently in an interview that he still believes in all this. 80% of Alberta's oil and gas needs to stay in the ground. He said he is that man that wrote that book Values. He was on the foundation board of the WEF. People forget that. And he's still listed, I think, as one of the authors for the WEF. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later.
He also said that it was correct, right and proper for the old Northern Gateway, for that to be killed. He said that was the right thing to do, and as he now sort of tries to rehash it and get it going again.
Imagine where Canada would be sitting right now if we had the Northern Gateway pipeline, in a lot better position than we are right now.
Yeah, and our reputation would be a lot higher as well in the places that matter, like the Pacific Rim, Southeast Asia. They would, we'd have much better relationships with them because we would be able to provide them with something that they need rather than, pointless lectures.
There's a really good video, and Ian's alluded to this in the past, and I'll try not to stay too long. I'm sure Ian will have something to add to it. It talks about world superpowers and over the ages, and it talks about the United States of America likely would be the last world superpower, not only because of its economy and all those things, but because of the geography. And Ian talks about geography all the time. The United States is fairly safe because it has oceans all around it, right? So it's very tough to invade or cause any problems with it. And it has the Mississippi that flows through, which makes it easy to transport goods and all that kind of stuff, makes it one of the biggest superpowers. Canada could enjoy almost the same thing if it would just actually utilize its resources and its ports. But we've done that to ourselves. We've done that. The political will is what's missing in Canada, and you alluded to it, and you say it's the weakness of leadership.
Totally. I would also say that geographically, Canada's like a real head scratcher, isn't it? It really doesn't make sense. I mean, there's a reason that the 49th parallel is just a straight line, because it was done in, I don't know, London or somewhere like that, or Paris, where they drew this line and said, you have that, you have that. Because it doesn't really make sense given where the people actually live in Canada, whereas parts of Canada are actually habitable. So that east-west transport problem is it's like a curse, isn't it, that Canada's suffered from its earliest days. But definitely, just we benefit from the same security. Definitely, I mean, in a way, you could say even more secure because we don't have a border with Latin America and lots of sort of quite dysfunctional countries down there. And then we've got America, obviously, beneath us to protect us from all the baddies out there. But yeah, we have not taken advantage of that. And it's almost surreal, isn't it, to see just over the years the hostility to being a rich country. Canadians who hate the idea of Canada being a rich country. I can't wrap my head around that. I just really do not understand that.
And there's many in the Liberal caucus, and one resigned, in the Liberal MPs that are against anything to do with oil and gas. And Stephen Guilbeault, one of the most outspoken ones, resigned because of it, resigned his cabinet position. And so, I mean, that's why there's not even discussion, like Ian said, there's not even a discussion about going east because it's not going to go anywhere. And it's basically saying, Canada can, I don't know how it's supposed to have a vibrant economy if it doesn't utilize its biggest assets. I mean, the rest of the world's laughed at us. I mean, the Polish ambassador laughed when he said, you're actually selling your gas to the Americans and then they mark it up and then sell it to us. It's comical.
It's, it's similar to the way people were laughing at the Europeans because they were boycotting Russian oil and then buying it from India, from the middleman. It's just like, what are you doing? You stupid people. You desperately, hopelessly stupid people. But, you know, we still live under this reign of stupidity, don't we? At least for now.
Yeah, and then this is guy John Rustad points it out. John Rustad, former leader of the BC Conservative Party. Canada does not have a supply problem, has a decision problem. And I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? I mean, I think it's obvious to everybody except for the government crippled and corrupted media. Or do they know it and just won't say it? Because I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like it's literally like right there. I mean, how many oil companies signed that letter and said if Canada wants prosperity, they need to revitalize the oil and gas industry?
Pretty much all of them, really. Anybody that mattered signed it.
And then Brian Lilly, we talked about him yesterday. The threat isn't Canada's oil industry. The threat isn't Canada's oil industry, isn't Venezuela oil replacing Canadian barrels. It's about the investment. We talked about that too, right? There is some reporters that get it. Like it's how do you get investment when there's no certainty? That's the big thing. That's the trick, right? And then here's this investment here. Here's the industrial implosion. Here's a graph for you. Like, look at it. It used to be, we used to ride with the wave of the American economy. We'd ride the wave with America. We don't anymore. We don't ride the wave. And sometimes we were even better than America. Our wages were higher, like our average wages were higher. Our standard of living was better. It's right there.
Yeah. And the great divergence occurred.
What's that date?
That familiar old time. Oh, I mean, it already started to diverge, in fairness, but 2015. Look at that. You can't. That's not a coincidence, is it? You can't ignore that.
No, it's pretty obvious. It's liberal policies, and they won't reverse any of them, including, and this is the thing we're going to talk about, the Online News Act. The U.S. trade body says get rid of supply management, Online News Act, and the Online Streaming Act. We haven't heard anything. Nobody, the media doesn't even want to talk about the Online News Act because why? Because they got their face in the trough. They got, like they're not viable because they don't want to tell the truth. So who's watching them? The cost of viewership for the CBC continuing to skyrocket as their viewership drops, but their funding increases. They, again, the Liberal candidate promised the CBC $150 million in his election. So, like, that shouldn't even be allowed. You promised the state broadcaster $150 million during an election cycle. Absolutely scandalous. And wish other outlets even picked it up. And I've talked to other media outlets here in different places. Help us. We've written so many stories on the Online News Act. We've talked to so many people. And I asked them to help. He said, well, we should do some stories together, help each other out. And I said, do a story on Bill C-18. No, can't do it. Don't want to risk getting the funding cut off. Like, and then I talked to somebody from CBC, and they said, we can't support Poilievre because we'll lose our jobs. Literally. This is from people.
And it's, I mean, but it's obvious, isn't it? Like looking after your own behind there. But that's why it was so wrong. Even if it wasn't legally strictly wrong, it was morally wrong, wasn't it, for the Liberals to basically offer a reward to the CBC if they were elected. It's just not on, is it? It's not good behavior. But earlier on we went quite fast past the environment minister's story from Blacklock's. I just wanted to highlight something from it. I forgot to at the time, where they had a little note given to them by the department. So the likes of Guilbeault and Debresin and all the rest of it had this note, and it ranks Canada as 11th in the world for emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. Obviously, that's not true, is it? Canada's not the 11th most important emitter of greenhouse gases. It's per capita. That's how they've done it. So just as a little, it's just a tiny little teaser, isn't it, really, of how misinformed our leaders are. That they look at things like this and they're like, oh God, like we're number 11. We're like right at the top of this list. Per capita means nothing. It doesn't mean anything at all. Do you think the biosphere cares about per capita? It's about how much comes out of each country, because that's realistically how this could be solved if you really wanted to get emissions down. And by that metric, Canada's like, I don't know, what is it, 60th or something? It's very far down. It's just like a complete irrelevance. It contributes nothing. But it's, if you ever wondered, sort of why is the political class so like ignorant and so stupid when it comes to carbon emissions? Why do they think Canada's like a big deal? It's because they're reading things like that, and they're too bloody stupid to figure it out. That per capita, obviously Canada's quite high on that list. So is Trinidad and Tobago. You know what I mean? Who cares about Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to this kind of thing? The only countries that matter, as we've said a million times, are China, the United States, and India. If you talk about any other country than them in this context, you're wasting your time.
To Idaho, man, the reason I pointed out all the time about CBC is because they take our tax dollars, $1.55 billion, but they're the ones that are shielding the Liberals to stay in power. They're the ones doing it. Like that's their secret. That's their weapon, because they have no accountability because the state broadcaster protects them. It is something that needs to be broken down if we're going to make some headway here and make Canada better. And talking about that, here's the Freeland thing. How long would Freeland last if this thing happened in the United States or the UK? How long would she be sitting as an MP?
They would be, and I'm not. This is not even a little bit of an exaggeration, as anybody that has any familiarity with Britain knows, and the British press knows. The British reporters will be at her house every day. Every single day, they would be outside of her house. They would jump her as she got into the car, saying, "Why are you not going to resign? Why are you not going to resign? When are you going to resign? Tell us, what's the date?" They would follow her everywhere. They would never give her a second. But obviously in Canada,
they would be bugging Carney to force her to resign
every single day. And I mean that every day. It would just be a firestorm.
And she would,
but because it's Canada, and because Canada doesn't really have a proper media, frankly, let's be honest, they're not being held to account. So Freeland is just, joy to the world. I mean, it's being reported in CBC again and again and again. It's like this unpaid part-time job, as if to say like, it doesn't really matter. It's just the Conservatives being stupid. It's like, do you know who else? Do you know who else works an unpaid job? Donald Trump. Should we just not care about Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump's not getting paid to do that job. He gives all his money away. He gives his salary away. He's never taken a penny. Does that mean like it's overblown? All of these fears about Donald Trump? Like, shut up. It's fine. He doesn't even get a salary.
She held the second most powerful position in Canada as the finance minister, also deputy prime minister, and she should never accepted that job while she's still retained. She should have resigned first and then accepted that job, if she was to accept that job at all. There's so many conflicts, and the media protecting it is and the ethics commissioner yesterday confirmed Freeland was subject to the act when she took the appointment because of confidential restrictions. We cannot talk about the individual. Of course not. Can't talk about it, right?
But also you're saying she should have resigned. Carney knew about it before. And
Christmas.
He alluded to that in that press conference. Yeah. He said, when I heard about it, I thought it would be consistent with taking that job for her to resign. What are you talking about, you fool? You're the prime minister. You're her boss. What do you mean you think it would be consistent? He should have immediately fired her or pressured her to resign. Again, talk about the media. Where's the accountability? They could just get away with anything. You can get away with absolutely anything that you want because nobody will hold you to account.
Let's listen to CBC run a little cover for her.
These two countries are allies, though, doesn't mean that their interests are perfectly aligned and would map neatly on top of one another. It is unclear how Freeland could sit on both sides of the negotiating table without having some kind of a conflict of interest, particularly in the context, for example, of the coalition of the willing talks tomorrow. Is she an advisor for Zelensky, or is she an advisor for Carney in the context of those talks? That is exactly what Conservatives are now seizing on. The foreign affairs critic for the Conservative Party of the opposition is Michael Chong. He posted on social media this morning that Freeland cannot be a Canadian MP, but also an advisor to a foreign government. He called on her, said she must choose to resign one role or the other role, but this couldn't continue. Other Conservative MPs speaking out today on social media have used stronger language than that, saying this was a blatant conflict of interest, and others suggesting that if her focus isn't Canada first, she needs to step down. The source close to her has suggested this isn't a question of if she would step down as MP, but when, knowing that the government right now needs every seat it has in the context of this minority parliament, acknowledging that there would be more to come in terms of her resignation, but that no date has been set. We already knew that she was moving to the UK. She is taking up a new job as head of the Roads Trust as of July 1st. Presumably, she was not going to continue to try to represent Toronto constituents once she was living in Oxford for that gig. But the Liberals may need her vote sooner rather than later, even if she were to resign immediately. It is not clear that the Prime Minister has enough of a window now to hold a by-election to replace her. MPs come back at the end of January. By mid or late March, there could be more confidence votes in the House of...
Good. So there you go. It's A-okay because the Liberals need her to retain power. So forget about all the conflict of interest. It's all about the Liberals needing to retain power. It's much more important than morality and ethics,
but also
confidence
democracy.
in Canada, democracy. Like those things take a back seat because Mark Carney needs her vote, so she can represent both Ukraine and Canada. And she's actually sitting in those negotiations today and has power still within the Canadian government.
Yeah. Democracy, I mean, everybody knows this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Democracy, translated, means rule of the people. A demos is the people. Chrystia Freeland is no longer part of our demos, is she? She's buggered off somewhere else. She's in England, she's in Ukraine. She's not part of the Canadian demos anymore. And yet she's ruling still. She's part of the ruling class.
We'll vote.
Even though she's not part of the people. How is that? How is that a democracy? It's even the very definition of the word tells you that she is not, that this is not democratic.
And that's my point, Idaho man. The CBC right there giving her an excuse to stay on. It's just a few weeks, she may have to vote. We may need her vote to retain Liberal power. That's not how democracies work.
But also, why is in that CBC piece there and elsewhere in the media as well, and even from the Tories, why is all the heat going to Freeland? I mean, fair enough, she's orchestrated this. She does deserve a lot of scrutiny and criticism, but it's all being put on her. But she has a boss. If he chooses to, he can get rid of her. He can kick her out of the Liberal caucus. He can do all kinds of things. But he could, he certainly could have fired her as envoy to Ukraine right at this get-go. Why is he not being criticized for that, and still not being criticized as he kind of dawdles along, like indecisive, hopeless, cannot make a decision, cannot be clear, and for some reason he just gets away with it all. Teflon Carney.
But look at this, like the first sentence here from Freeland in her. Ukraine is at the forefront of today's global fight for democracy. You just slapped democracy in the face, and Canadian democracy. It's just an affront to democracy, and then you're saying their democracy is more important, so this is how it works. And then you put
whose democracy? That's the question.
This should be a firestorm. It would be in the United States. She wouldn't survive it. In the UK, she wouldn't survive it. But in Canada, here's the thing: we can't get access to the Liberals. They won't give us interviews. They won't do anything, and they rarely give even interviews to the government-funded media. Like they take 10 minutes of questions. They call Donald Trump the threat to democracy, who sits down with the media for 3 hours a day, and all their people will go on every show that they dislike, every show that they call left-leaning or whatever, but they will go sit there for an hour with them all the time. This government does not believe in democracy. They do not wish to be held accountable. This proves it again.
Well,
Another piece of advice. Go ahead.
I have a feeling that they do believe in democracy, but they just don't know what democracy is. They don't understand it. They actually could not define it, to the point where she can say things like that, undermine the very idea of Canada having a healthy democracy by talking about a democracy in another bloody country. To people like Freeland, that's the same thing. Like Ukrainian democracy, Canadian democracy, it's like, it's all the same thing. And that's one of the main flaws associated with internationalism, or globalism, as some people call it. They've kind of globalized this idea of democracy. Obviously, that's not democracy. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. It's it's oxymoronic. It just doesn't function like that. So I think that they reckon themselves to be Democrats, but I mean, quite clearly, they're not. Their behavior is not conducive to democracy in Canada.
And then this is from Robert Maloney, put out this piece, Christy, and I mean, she was on the WEF website as one of the she was one of their directors or whatever. Remember, she ran for the Liberal leadership there, and she scrubbed that off there really quickly because a lot of them are on there. Even Klaus Schwab, in his accent there, said that he was proud that Justin Trudeau and many of his that he infiltrated. Those are the words he used. He infiltrated the Liberal cabinet, and that
It's a good meme.
the best villain ever, right? And yeah, and Mark Carney was one of the foundation members of the WEF and in the climate change agenda that has crushed and crippled our economy. We're beating this to death. I was going to play this thing from Kate Harrison, but there's no point. Like, we beat this Freeland thing. It's just it's atrocious, and if she has any class at all, and if there's anything left of this Canadian media, they should be pushing for her to resign. There should be no rest until she resigns. But
I don't even know if it's classiness. It's just the basics, isn't it? This is like, if you really believe in a free, open, liberal democracy, this is the basics. And once again, what is this, like the 20th time in the last year or something like that? They've shown that they don't behave in a way that's conducive to democracy. And if anything, it's their actions weaken democracy.
We're just going to listen to Mark Carney because he got that question, and we're going to go past the other ones there because, like I said, we beat this thing. There's not much room to get out of it. But here's Mark Carney answering a question on it.
Alberta, so we'll be working towards that.
Ms. Freeland resigned yesterday as your special representative.
Is that a follow-up?
The
That seems like a
reconstruction.
totally different
I wish we
question.
had more time. I wanted to ask more Venezuela stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Did you ask her not to quit because of the minority parliament situation right
No,
now?
absolutely not. First off, let me.
I should say, as a member of parliament.
Let me. No. Just to be clear. Ms. Freeland, Krista has served our country for well over a decade in a formal role as a parliamentarian, certainly in a number of ministerial posts, and served with great distinction. She was. I had her as my special envoy after she left cabinet for the Ukraine reconstruction. Judgment became her judgment that she could be more useful for that process as she was leaving, as she was retiring as a parliamentarian, as a direct advisor. My judgment was that taking that role would be consistent with resigning as an MP, and I welcomed her doing that, and I'm pleased that for Ukraine, and again, if I can reemphasize and bring it back to today, there is real momentum. Nothing's assured, but there's real momentum in this peace process, and the security guarantees are incredibly important, but as is the reconstruction and the prosperity plan, and she'll be there to work on that. And look, we'll have a by-election. There'll be a few by-elections coming up, and we'll run great candidates, and the people in those ridings will decide who they want to send to Parliament.
I don't know how he thinks it's funny, but
Also, like, that was passive aggression. He might have smiled and giggled, but when he said, like, "Oh, that's a follow-up," that's passive aggression. That's like, you could almost call that kind of bullying. There's obviously a power imbalance there. And it's his fault as well. He's the guilty one because he won't bloody stand there and take questions. But he still has the cheek and the viciousness almost just to mock and tease and torment these hapless journalists that follow him around. But yeah, again, I think he just said something so peculiar there. He's like, "I welcome this." That's not the language of a leader. That's not the language of somebody decisive, is it? Can you imagine that with your own kids? Just like, "I welcome your decision not to stay out till 2 a.m. smoking weed." It's like, what? He's just, and obviously I know that's not the perfect analogy, but he has to be a leader. He has to be decisive, and he has to start taking responsibility for things that occur and things that people do who are under his command, as it were.
And here's I got two more pieces on Freeland here, but this one here is put out because we have to remember that Freeland helped George Soros manage Trudeau. This is according to Ezra Levant here. But Trudeau was a young global leader with the WEF. Freeland was on that website as a director. Mark Carney was on that website as a foundation member and still a contributor and an author of many of the articles in this globalist. And globalism is basically dead for all intents and purposes with the changing administration in America.
Well, it could be resurrected, of course. We don't know what's going to happen in the next election in America, and that's what makes this quite an uncertain and tense period. Even though there seems to be quite a lot of gloating, grandstanding from the Republican Party in America right now, might not last long. And then the Soroses of this world and the Chrystia Freelands will be back in business, won't they? So,
well, here's somebody. We'll end this Chrystia Freeland segment with what the Canadian tree bear and the bucket full. I mean, when are we going to start asking for money? I guess is my question. When do we start applying for foreign aid?
it's such a harsh cartoon of Chrystia Freeland, isn't it? But somehow they do get her proportions right.
And then the Globe and Mail and a few other nut bars have put out pieces. We need to prepare for the possibility the U.S. uses military coercion against Canada. Seriously, this is what you're going to run, Globe and Mail? This is the headline you want to run? Don't forget, Chrystia Freeland also said she talked to, what was it, a 4-year-old? That the American tanks were going to roll in the streets of Canada when they needed to win an election. I guess obviously they need the boomers and that lady. Remember we had the lady we played earlier. They're screaming that you better effing listen. And that here we go. We're ramping up the talk now. The American tanks are going to roll in our streets. I don't think we'd put up much of a fight. The Venezuela has a better chance of rolling back the Americans than we do. But here's Charlie Angus. Charlie Angus, like, oh my God. How do they go and find him every time they need somebody to just be an absolute nut bar? And I'm not going to play this clip, but Charlie Angus is basically saying that, Canada is going to be attacked by the Americans. This Charlie Angus, I'm surprised he was an NDP MP, and he would scream at people calling them racist when they question immigration, all kinds of things. Like he is, why we're here, where we're at. He is like, like people like that are why we're here at this crossroads right now.
Indeed. And I love it when people do this and they point their camera or they put their backs against their bookshelf, point the camera there. It's like, I read books, man. But I just find it very interesting that if you look on the left there, he's got a biography by the looks of things of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was an anti-Nazi dissident and a sort of pastor during the Reich, and he was murdered. He was executed for his labors. And I just find it so funny because he's called people on camera random citizens fascists, and I think even Nazis as well, hasn't he? So obviously, I know this is a bit of kind of like pop Freudianism, but I get the feeling that he fancies himself as a kind of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and he's like fighting against the neo-Nazis like Donald Trump. It just gives you an idea of how utterly deluded these people are, almost to the point of being like fantasists, aren't they? They're living in like a fantasy land.
That's why that book is showcased there with the.
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, it's not accidental, is it? That's there, and that he considers himself this great anti-fascist. Obviously, he hasn't got even half the balls of Bonhoeffer, and would never have done. I mean, based on my assessment of his character, don't think he would have done half of what Bonhoeffer did. Bonhoeffer really put his life at risk, obviously, and lost his life to do it. Charlie Angus goes around calling random Canadian citizens fascists.
And this is Brian Lilly putting it out there, who writes for the Toronto Sun, I believe, is that they're whipping up the fear again, because that's what they're doing. They got to get the fear up. You got to convince the boomers that the tanks are going to roll in the streets. Well, if the tanks roll in the streets, there's not a lot that Canada could do because we've underfunded, under-equipped, undermanned, and underpaid our military for the past, forever.
I mean, even if we spent 80% of our GDP or something like that on defense, could we resist the United States military? No.
Well, we'd have to call our friends, the Americans, to protect us from the Americans.
We'd have to call the Democrats to
Yeah.
protect us from the Republicans.
And
Kamala Harris will come in on a tank.
And then we have to remember when Mark Carney was interviewed, he said that he never tried to lure any of the MPs that, well, the MP that crossed over there. He never did any of that. They were attracted to him. It was the attraction that did it, not the luring. Well, it turns out there's one here in Vernon. I think we're going to see if we can get him on. And it says that it was far from attraction. It was basically trying to buy him into the Carney Liberals.
Yeah.
Again, who's telling the truth here? Because if we don't have a leader that tells the truth, it's tough to believe and have certainty in Canada if you don't even have, somebody that is able to tell the truth.
Well, you would suspect politicians, like lawyers, lie when they open their mouths, don't they? It's just completely natural to them. It's as natural as breathing. The difference between, the Canadian system and some others, as we point out, is that there are reasonably healthy media outlets, media ecosystems in these other countries, and they catch them out in their lies and they make them think twice and they punish them for lying. In Canada, that doesn't happen. So there's no consequences for lying. So this is like, an eagle flying around. Like, obviously it's doing what it does naturally. The politician will lie naturally. If you don't have a press that punishes you for lying as a politician, it's just like Bob's your uncle. Wow, and just lie all day long.
And that's the Okanagan Tory MP, and that's Vernon Lake Country Monarchy MP Scott Anderson said the Liberals are pulling out all the stops to encourage Tories himself to defect and give Mark Carney his majority that he wants. And that's after 2 Conservatives MPs left the party and joined the Grits in November and December. And we're going to try and fly through some of this stuff here because there's a lot still to go at. And here's one here from Holly Dones. We talked about it yesterday, how Gary Andesang, you tell me, Gary Andesang.
Anand Desang Gary. Maybe that's the best way to do it. It's like a song.
How he still has his job is just blows me away. But they're going to reduce those fees from to $5 and then not even tell you who got fined. $5. The parking tickets or $50. I shouldn't say $5. Mine was be $5. So, but this is now they're saying this is undermining. Quite a few outlets have done. Independent media have done this. I don't know if CBC's done it. Is undermining federal law to unmask foreign agents. That's from the vice chair of the Commons Public Safety Committee. That was yesterday. These are not the actions of a government that takes foreign interference seriously. I mean, we said that yesterday too. He's a former Crown prosecutor. In fact, they reflect the opposite and are insulting to the countless Canadians, including members of Parliament, who've had to continue to be targeted by foreign intimidation and interference. They basically kneecap. They said that how many years did they delay bringing this foreign registry to bear? And then when they finally bring it to bear, they kneecap it and tell you that they're not even going to tell you who gets a fine, and fines will be as low as $50. And then they can be reversed. The fines can be reversed as long as the person says they wouldn't do it again. Like, can you imagine that if that's what they said to you, for crimes that you commit? Just like, well, if you get caught, we'll give you a fine, but then we can reverse as long as you say you won't do it again. Okay.
Yes, my lord, of course.
Okay. And then here's another one. Take blame for big IT failure. This is Shared Services Canada. The Federal IT Department promises it has learned its lessons after blaming staff error for a day-long shutdown of electronic security checks and border controls last September. No one was fired. Of course not. And no travelers or shippers were compensated for delays. The outage resulted in delays of airlines, airports from turning international travelers on September 28th until early Monday, September 29th. But again, nobody gets fired, nobody gets anything, and everybody gets their bonus come bonus time, which they just had. We'll find out about those bonuses.
It's a human right.
Hey, we'll find out about those bonuses probably in a year and a half when they release the information, because we were reporting on the bonuses from 2 years ago, because that's how long it takes to get in information.
And then they can say, oh, we fixed that ages ago. Don't worry about that. That's sorted.
And it's a bad year for prison breaks. Another one from Blacklocks. And CBC doesn't do these stories. The Correctional Services 2025 was a bad year for prison breaks. The number of escapes from federal penitentiaries more than doubled. No reason given. Why would there be a reason given, right? Hey?
That sentence, do you think that Blacklock's HQ, they just have like a shortcut that just pastes that sentence. No reason was given.
19 convicts escaped. 19. I mean, I think in many other places, they would be losing their minds if you had that many criminals escaping. How is it that they can do it?
Healing lodges as well. 7 incidents at healing lodges.
And here's, listen to this. Research also showed most escapees were career petty criminals under 35 who were serving their first federal sentence, and the human brain not fully developed in its capacity for cognitive functioning and emotional regulation until well into young adulthood. Younger convicts are more likely to be gang members and have fewer job skills than many criminal friends and a history of drug use at an early age. Those in younger age groups are more likely to have attitudes of supported goal-oriented violence and to disrespect personal belongings. So that's okay, then what?
But there's a good bit there, though they are less likely to deny crime or use excuses to justify or minimize crime. We know a lot of people who do use excuses, don't we?
It makes you sigh. But here's our immigration. Nearly 5 million visas set to expire in 2025. We're set to expire in 2025. And where are they now? The government says, we don't know. We don't track that. Canada does not keep exit statistics on foreign visa holders. As 2025 began, federal records show there was 4.9 million visas set to expire, with Conservatives pressing Liberal government on how to deal with that. And Mark Miller, the person that we've asked for an interview from, who denied it after 2 months, has said that the majority leave voluntarily. That's what's expected. But we have no idea who comes and goes.
It's quite painful, that, isn't it?
And
I mean, what kind of we say this so often that it kind of loses its effect, doesn't it? But what kind of government do we actually have here? Do they even know how many people are in this country? My guess is no, not at all. They don't. I would imagine they're pretty far away in their estimates of how many people are here. Never mind, like, whether these people are going to actually voluntarily leave.
How many stories do we do on cabinet ministers that have no idea what's going on in their cabinet? How many stories have we done in the past 6 months? Like, we could go back and you could show you. If you watch this show regularly, we could show you how many cabinet ministers cannot answer questions in committee, have no idea what's going on in their cabinet, and have spent money like drunken sailors, like literally.
And dodge the press, so they're never scrutinized.
And then say they can't release the information. And here it is, the Francois Philippe Champagne and Mark Carney tout continually in the Liberal social accounts, tout continually the tax cut they've given Canadians, which amount, they touted it as $850 for the average family, which according to the PBO's office was actually about $250 for the average family, and as low as $11 for some Canadians, as low as $11. But guess what's coming? In April 1, you're going to get yourself a tax hike, and because I say tax hike, but it's going to be a CPP hike because they're talking about accessing your CPP like it was taxes. A worker making $85,000 will pay $5,700 in payroll taxes this year. That's about a $262 payroll tax hike. So there you go. So that's like close to most Canadians that are making in around that will pay another $262. And don't forget, the employer will also pay 1.4 times that because the employer will pay the 262 plus another 40%. So again, another reason employers are looking not to hire more people because it just gets more and more expensive because payroll burden is also a tax. But hey, if you want to sell drugs in Canada, you can just use Canada Post or our ports for that matter, because they don't expect our ports. I think it was at 1% to 5%. You hear different numbers, but not a lot. I interviewed Macklin McCall here in MLA, a former RCMP officer, said, like most of the drugs and guns and all that stuff is come right through the ports and the rail. And even better, you can actually go online in the dark web there and you can order some cocaine and it'll get delivered courtesy of the Canadian government-funded Canada Post.
Heavily subsidized Canada Post, yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Whose workers are now back on the job because they signed a deal that included a more generous gender transitioning package in part. And I'm not being silly here. That was like one of their top 3 demands. They demanded that. That's not me being a cheeky boy. that was like really, like they said, there's a red line on the transitions. But I mean, when it comes to dropping off heroin,
Not just heroin, cocaine, heroin, and ecstasy are being brought online with credit cards and e-transfers and then delivered to people's homes by Canada Post. But hey, if you make a donation to the Freedom Convoy, we will freeze your bank account and make your life miserable. But hey, if you want to do cocaine, heroin, and ecstasy and have that done with credit cards and e-transfers and get it delivered by Canada Post, come in.
and you know, we mentioned Mark Miller earlier. If he was master of the universe, you would get in a lot of trouble as well if you got your Quran out or your Bible and quoted a line, a passage in opposition to something like this, and he'd be like, "That's hate speech."
And then they're freaking out because Ontario and Alberta are sending their provincial employees, provincial employees, back to work 5 days a week, and they're they're protesting and talking about resignations. I doubt many will resign. I have a lot of them probably have second jobs, and I've heard that from people that many of them not going to work are actually working different jobs. That's one of the reasons they don't want to go back to work, because how are they going to do their second job when they're at work?
A lot of these people as well, like the bureaucrats. I mean, I don't want to be harsh here, but a lot of them, what are the transferable skills there? What can they do in the private sector if they're not going to work in the public sector? How's that going to work? Like, I mean, a lot of them are literally, they're kind of just they're just occupying space, or not, as the case may be, because they're not even in the office.
Well, here's what's coming to Canada. Here's a look at it. We've seen the failures in Canada on the battery plants that I think was Northvolt, Elenore. How many of them failed and how many of them put off? How many billions of dollars did Canada put into battery plants? But here's one that failed in Australia. Let's listen in onto this one. This is from none other than BlackRock, $1 billion. Let's listen in to Sky News here.
Australia's renewable transition has hit a major hurdle. There's been a catastrophic failure in a $1 billion battery project north of Sydney. It's the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere. It's called the Waratah Battery. It's owned by BlackRock and is considered critical infrastructure by the New South Wales state government. But it's now, quote, beyond repair. Australia's renewable transition has...
That's good. Hey, it's only $1 billion, right? BlackRock, I'm sure, did well on it.
But again, when your rationale, when your justification for doing these kinds of things is we have to literally save the planet and everybody that lives on it, all animals, all plants, we have to preserve the biosphere. Then when that's your justification, losing $1 billion here and there is like, that's like chicken feed, isn't it? Hence, perhaps, maybe, why they exaggerate and reach hysterical conclusions about climate change.
Cameco stock price soars as U.S. Nuclear energy rebounds. Again, Cameco, Canadian company, great Canadian company. And that and Westinghouse, Cameco and Westinghouse partner together, and Westinghouse is half owned by Brookfield, have agreed to do 8 nuclear plants in the United States. That's Mark Carney's Brookfield. Where are they doing them in Canada? No, that's a Canadian company. And yeah, the Cameco, a lot of the uranium stocks in Canada are soaring, which is great. The stock market today up dramatically again after a huge day yesterday. The stock market on fire. A lot of people saying all the, the Democrats in the U.S. said the stock market would implode after the Venezuelan thing. Turns out it's gone the other way. The only thing that went down yesterday was the energy sector, and it's feeling pressure again today. The only red on the board today for the major U.S. and Canadian stock markets is the Canadian Energy Index, which is under pressure because now they think that a lot of the investment dollars will flow to the American companies that will be investing heavily in Venezuela to get that oil back online.
Well, they've been promised. We promise massive subsidies and reimbursements for American carbon capture companies.
Yeah.
The American government is promising massive reimbursements to go and get oil out of Venezuela.
For actual energy, and we're providing massive subsidies, 75 cents on the dollar, to create something that doesn't do anything other than fill the coffers of Brookfield that's invested billions and billions of dollars into CCUS. Again, gold on fire again this morning. Gold up $42 and Canadian dollars. This will surprise some people. Gold is at $61.95. Can you believe that? Gold at $61.95. Canada, the only G7 nation to hold zero gold reserves, zero Tiff Macklin, and that includes Mark Carney when he was Bank of Canada governor, said it's an antiquated asset that they would rather hold U.S. Treasury bills. Silver over $80 right now. Silver in U.S. dollars at 81.21. That's massive for silver. Massive for silver. And again, most of the metals up: copper, lead, zinc, everything. It's great time to be a miner. Maybe not so great in Canada, because why would you invest billions of dollars into a mine project in British Columbia when you could do the same thing in the US? I interviewed a CEO of a mining operation that has properties in both BC and Alaska and I think it was Nevada. And guess where they're spending their money? You can just take a guess. It would be
Sunny
Nevada. It would be.
Your mic's gone, Matt, I believe. Unless it's mine.
There we go. Am I back?
Yep.
There you go. Look at that. We got new mics, but obviously we go too long. The battery just died.
Can't handle it.
We got some BC news and we got some really good stuff in the international section. But we want a small piece for BC here.
Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.